welcome to the end of Chapter 21 lecture. It's the lecture on nationalism and unification. It's really focusing on the idea of and concept of nationalism, which will be a contributing factor to World War I. And then we're showing some examples of nationalism in play. So before we get into, and this is not necessarily on the notes, so you want to write this down. When you listen to Edpuzzles, it should be you writing notes on the notes that you have given in front of you. That makes you an active learner and not a passive learner. So you want to make sure that as I'm going over things, you should be taking active notes on this lecture, not just waiting for the questions to come up. So you want to write down the definition of nationalism. The definition of nationalism is extreme pride in your nation. Now, it's easy to confuse nationalism and patriotism, right? We want to be patriotic. I'm American, I'm proud to be American. I'm Spanish, I'm proud to be from Spain. And you display your patriotism. July 4th, we display our patriotism. We wear American flags, we put our flags out. You go to, there are events that are dedicated to the independence movement. That's patriotism. Nationalism separates it because it's seen as this extreme nature of patriotic fervor, and it's also seen as almost a negative connotation, meaning I have pride in my nation is best. And in order for me to prove my nation is best, I must make yours inferior to my superiority. So nationalism is a feeling of national superiority to everyone else around you. Not only do I love my nation, but my nation is best and yours isn't. And I'm going to have to show you that your nation isn't that great. One of the remnants of Napoleon, other than the Napoleonic Code, which is the civil code of law that he writes that really hammers down equality and is seen as the basis of laws that follow throughout Europe, is Napoleon established this nationalism within France, right? He loved being French. Yay, France, winning France. France is awesome. But the way that they were going to show France was awesome was by creating this empire, by taking over other countries and showing them how powerful and amazing France is. We're powerful and amazing because we can take you down. That's sort of what that idea spreads. And you begin to see these rumblings of nationalism that start occurring post-Napoleon, post-revolutionary period of the Latin American revolutions, etc. And nationalism really comes to a disastrous head in World War I, which isn't going to start until 1914. So when I say rumblings, I mean there are rumblings and stirrings of it that are going to occur. And then it's going to come ahead again when we look at totalitarian states and the rise of socialism and communism within Europe post-World War I. So let's look at some examples. So in the Italian peninsula, which includes Italy, had really not been unified since the fall of Rome. And if you remember, we talk about the Ottomans and Venice itself, looking at that as something separate. But in the Italian peninsula, most people speak the same language, but it's divided into competing city-states, each with its own government, and each competing with each other to be the #1 power on the Italian peninsula. Well, Napoleon invades Italy, and he unites the states under one government, but the unification doesn't last. After he's defeated, the Congress of Vienna splits Italy back into the city-states. And then this period of nationalism sort of starts to rise and rubble. And we're going to begin to see a change in not wanting to be competing city-states, but one united Italy that works on being awesome and expanding Italianness. We've already talked about the Congress of Vienna. We said that Prince Metternich wanted the Congress of Vienna because he wanted to go back to the old regime, the old relationships, the way things were. They also needed to deal with the fact that Napoleon came back after they thought they had dealt with him. So 15 years after the Congress of Vienna, the old order is basically destroyed beyond repair. Europe isn't going to go back to the way that they were pre-Napoleon. It's just not going to happen. They're not going to be the way they were pre-French Revolution, pre-American Revolution, pre-Latin American revolutions. That world is gone, over and done with. And you can try to cling to those old ideas, but that's not going to happen. Doesn't mean that we're getting rid of monarchies. But the old structure, the power structure, it's been challenged, and those ideas aren't going to go away. In 1800s, nationalism began to be a growing force within Europe, and it really was fostered by a lot of the decisions made at the Congress of Vienna. And here's why. So the Congress of Vienna had ignored national groups, and it basically placed them under the control of large empires. And a lot of the empires that were created within the Congress of Vienna included different ethnic groups who didn't necessarily want to be together. We'll see the same problem happening after the partition of Africa during the Age of Imperialism, which we're dangerously close to. Italians are split into 3 groups. So northern Italy is ruled under Austria. Some states are under the Habsburgs, and some are under French ruler. And so now the Italians are sort of bound together, and the fact that they don't like being ruled by foreign powers, just like the colonies and wherever the colonies were didn't like being ruled by foreign powers. They wanted that sense of independence and the uniting factor in their common idea of we are Italians. So Italian artists, writers, and thinkers became very interested in celebrating Italy's cultural traditions. Other groups formed secret societies that worked to overthrow the Austrian government that was in charge of a large portion of Italy. So once again, just like what you have with the ideas of the American Revolution, you have the intellectuals really getting together and forming those ideas, and then being the ones that are disseminating those revolutionary ideas out. A popular writer named Giuseppe Mazzini launched a nationalist group called Young Italy, and the goal of Young Italy is to fight for the unification of Italian states. He gets exiled because, you don't want a rabble rouser, but he still managed to get into Italy several pamphlets. And in this time period, if you were angry or you wanted to spread an idea, you wrote a strongly worded letter. A lot of history is based on people writing strongly worded letters, or pamphlets. Pamphlets are, if you go to a rest stop and you get a pamphlet on Disney World or Busch Gardens, it's a little trifold thing that you can look at. Sometimes the pamphlets are longer, and they describe ideas. Pamphlets and the spreading of pamphlets, for example, in the American Rebellion, it was something written by Thomas Paine called Common Sense. Ideas written by different Enlightenment thinkers. So this is what we're thinking, the same concept here. A lot of people were attracted to the concept of Young Italy, and they wanted to unify Italy and then throw off the burden of foreign rule. And we've seen this story time and time and time again. The Italian nationalism grew, and some Italians led unsuccessful rebellions. That's why they're not revolutions, because they weren't successful. They're just rebellions. And then you begin to see real people rising up and taking a lead in the movement to unify Italy. So in 1848, the nationalist-inspired revolution spread throughout Europe. So they're not just in Italy, they're occurring in other places as well, which is something the Congress of Vienna had been trying to prevent with their ideas, and they actually ended up creating it. In some Italian states, citizens rebelled against Austrian rule. The Piedmont area declared war on Austria, and they fought them for a really long time, were defeated. Others seized Rome, and in 1849, the troops helped the Pope regain control. So there's the connection, the religious connection here. The only successful revolt happened on the island of Sardinia. Rulers were forced to grant a new constitution, and Sardinia remained independent. One of the most important leaders of the Italian unification movement is Cavour, and he founded, again, a take on the strongly worded letter. Words are so very powerful because you can't take them back. Once it's out there, once people have heard it, there is no taking it back. You have unleashed it for whatever it is, good or bad or indifferent, whether they're spoken or whether they're written. Words are so powerful. The old thing, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. The fact is, words can hurt, and they can also help. So make the ones you say be really important and meaningful. And so here in his paper, he's talking about the resurgence or the rebirth of Italian pride. Italy was the height of the Renaissance. Even though they had city-states, Italy had this going together. Why is Italy in the state it is now? We shouldn't be there. So in 1852, Cavour becomes the prime minister of the independent kingdom of Sardinia, and he really thought that in order to make Italy be reborn as a united Italy, the economy needed to be on point. And he's right. You can't be reborn and be fledgling with your economy. So he worked to build the Sardinian economy. He believed that Italy should be reborn as a monarch. So here's the interesting thing. We're not talking about being reborn as a democracy. We're talking about being reborn united, and whether that is a monarch or an elected person is goes back and forth, but they're talking about a monarch. They want a monarch. Bring him in. So Cavour is actually in a position to really cultivate powerful allies. He had supported France in their war against Russia, which, you know, we'll know how that turns out later on. And he gave the French different provinces that they could have connected to Italy. And so France agreed to support Sardinia against their war with Austria. Note that France is really important in world history. From Napoleon to the French Revolution to the support of America during their revolution, a lot of times things are coming back to France, which is interesting because we don't talk a lot about them prior to really the Enlightenment, that kind of period. France comes in and out, right? But it seems like once we get to the end of period 4, period 5, we keep saying France, 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 France. It'll go away again. But there's a period was super duper important. And in 1860, the northern Italian states are free from Austrian control. Yay, Italy, with the help of France. So how do things go from there? Many Italian people considered Cavour the brains of the operation and Mazzini the heart. Mazzini is the one talking about and rallying people together with the propaganda of uniting Italy. And Cavour's over there figuring out how it logistically has to be done. You got an ideas man, and you got a man that's doing the legwork of how it needs to be done. And they work together. Neither one can really exist without the different. But there's another guy that's going to come in. Giuseppe Garibaldi has been called the Sword of Italy. Now, he joins the Young Italy movement that's founded by Mazzini in 1833. He leads a lot of nationalist activities in this work to unite Italy and get rid of foreign rule. So much so that he is up on the list of who people would like to, foreign powers would like to get rid of. So he has to flee Italy twice to avoid being killed. And in his fleeing, at one point he's living in South America and he learns the techniques of what we know as guerrilla warfare. At this time, when soldiers fought, Team A lined up on one side, Team B was on the other side, and they basically shot at each other. You had surrounding lines. And then this line would reload and this line would shoot. And then this line would reload while this line was shooting. It really doesn't make a lot of sense. Guerrilla warfare is the concept that you are hiding in the bushes fighting. You're not lining up in front of each other fighting. It's tactical fighting. It, to me, makes much more sense. But who am I? So he returned to Italy to continue the fight to free Italy from Austrian domination. And I can't find my mouse here. Oh, there it is. And when he comes back with these ideas of how to do guerrilla warfare that's not how the other ones are fighting, kind of to throw them off. In 1854, Garibaldi returns for good. Cavour is asked to lead part of this part of the Sardinian army against Austria. After a big fight, the Austrians give up Lombardy, and it goes back, and then they retain a small part. So followers known as the Red Shirts, because they wore, ready for this? Red shirts. So if you follow the Italian nationalist movement, you're considered a red shirt. And in 1860, using guerrilla warfare, Garibaldi and the Red Shirts gained control of the island of Sicily. And in September, they move on to control Naples. And then they find that the red shirts have controlled the entire southern part of the Italian peninsula. And he offers the kingdom of two Sicilies to the Sardinian king Victor Emmanuel. All right. So slowly but surely, the red shirts, led by Cavour, Mazzini, and Garibaldi, but Garibaldi's actually the sword of it, are working slowly but surely to kick out the foreign powers that had divided Italy so that Italy can unite. In 1861, the territories within Italy, or the states within Italy, held an election and they agreed to unification. There was a holdout, Venetia, which was still owned by Austria. The Papal States, the area surrounding the Vatican, they were under French troops and they were supporting the Pope. So they're kind of separate because of their allegiance to the Pope, because the Vatican City is an independent area that's within Italy. It's its own thing, but it's located in Italy. So in 1866, Prussia and Austria are fighting, and in the fight between Prussia and Austria, Prussia beats Austria. Prussia is made up on the area of the former Germanic lands, and then they give Venetia to Italy. They also force the French to withdraw from Rome. And then once the French are out of Rome, the Italian troops enter there, and now finally all of Italy is united under King Victor Emmanuel. But remember, we like the idea of a king. That's pretty awesome. Now we finally get a map so you can understand. So here's Sardinia, right? And this map is showing you Garibaldi's route. So he goes from Sardinia, and then he goes up here, and then we're going to go down, and this is a great map. I know that on your notes you can't see anything because of how it's colored, but it's a really good map, so you might want to take a look at it. My voice starts going out, it's because I'm moving the mic and I can hear the feedback in my headset, and I'm only assuming that you can hear it as well. So the colors represent when the different areas are annexed by Italy itself. And the last areas to be annexed, you're looking here at Rome. And then this area up here where Venice, the city of Venice is. And you can see how easy it was for Austria to control them because they're right there. All right, challenges of after unification. In the years after unification, Italy faced a bunch of new challenges. They were politically unified, but Italy had to deal with a number of social and economic problems. Their social and economic problems, they had strong regional differences that led to a lack of unity. The Southern Italians resented being governed by Rome. The Catholic Church didn't recognize Italy as a legit nation because they didn't see them as that. They have issues with poverty. They have issues with unemployment. And they're trying to make reforms because that's the number one priority, but they're not giving everyone the right to vote. In the beginning, only wealthy Italian men could vote. And then later on, most adult male taxpayers could vote. But not everyone. We're not even going to worry about women because nobody was giving women the right to vote. So they have, and we see this with the Latin American revolutions, you have unification, you get rid of your foreign powers, but that doesn't really solve all your problems. There are a lot of growing pains that occur after that. So as Italy industrializes, particularly in the north, the government passes reforms looking at laws limiting work hours, prohibiting or ending child labor. They encourage a lot of infrastructure changes, whether it be to transportation, to water systems, to encouraging industry. In 1882, Italy forms, and this will be very important later on, they form a military alliance with the nation of Austria-Hungary and Germany, and they agree to defend each other against any possible attack. It is known as the Triple Alliance. This alliance system will be a huge, huge, huge reason for World War I. So we've already talked about two big causes of World War I that will happen that started in the 1800s, the concept of nationalism and the alliance system. You need to know those. Do not forget them. So Italy decides they'd like to build an empire. Why not? And they gain control over Ethiopia, which is in North Africa, or they try to, but they get defeated by the Ethiopian army in 1896, which was sort of an embarrassment to Italy. And by 1911, they decided to declare war on the Ottoman Empire because it was at the end of the Ottoman Empire. They were already really weakened, and because they wanted to gain territory in Africa. The Ottoman Empire and Italy in the beginning will start to be on the same side. Actually, interesting, the start of World War I, and then things are going to change. So let's move on, and we're going to look at German unification. And at this point, I should be about 20 minutes into it, and I'm going to try to go quickly so we don't have another 40-minute ed puzzle. I would like that not to occur. I'm sure that you don't want to, but I can't help it. There's a ton of information. So Germany was not a unified nation until 1848. It was all the independent states, just like Italy. Napoleon had nurtured the concept of nationalism within the German states, and then after he's defeated, the Congress of Vienna retains that organization, and they call it the German Confederation. 39 separate states that are pulled together with a common language and a common culture. And so they want to be united under one Germany. In 1848, when the revolutionary ideas keep going through Europe, German liberals also took it as an opportunity to revolt, and they couldn't decide whether they wanted a monarchy or a republic. Weren't really sure. A limited monarchy. But they agreed that a united Germany would promote individual rights and it would promote reforms. There were a lot of calls for democracy, and the Prussian king, Frederick Wilhelm IV, says, you know what? We'll have a constitution. By the way, Prussia is within the German states, and we'll have lots of reforms. At the end of 1848, he never did that because, quite frankly, he never intended to. And he goes back on his promises, and there is no constitution written. He then decides to ban anything, any publication, any ideas that are supporting democracy. In 1834, Solvarian, a customs union is created, and they want to remove any tariffs on products traded between the different German states. So if I'm trading from one German state to another, I'm not going to tax your good. They want, and that's an effort at making them economically united. That was the goal. They want to join Germans economically, and that makes it easier for you to become joined political. Their economy's doing really well, and this sense of being united under a common German culture is also beginning to grow. So Otto von Bismarck is a conservative politician, and he's the big leading force behind the German unification. So if you've got Mazzini and Garibaldi and Cavour in Italy, you have Otto von Bismarck in the German area. And he becomes really prominent in Prussian politics. Again, Prussia is one of the bigger areas in the German Confederation. And he gives a really conservative speech at the National Assembly. And the Prussian king, King Wilhelm I, chooses Bismarck as the prime minister. So you have the king, and then you have your legislative body and the person actually carrying out the work with Bismarck as the prime minister. He's not liberal like many revolutionaries. He's very conservative in the reforms that he wants to have. He's not getting crazy. He supported the king. He's all right with having a limited monarchy or constitutional monarchy. So you got the monarch, they're doing their thing, but the monarch's power is checked by your parliament and your prime minister, which is like a president. He believed that Prussia was destined to really lead the German people into unification. We'll talk about realpolitik later. Don't worry about that. So the politics of reality are evident in the push to increase Prussian military power. He gives a speech and says that it's not run on speeches. We actually have to get work done, and that might consider bringing to some bloodshed. The Prussian army is pretty much amazing. They're built for war itself. So then you begin to have some disagreements, particularly that are ultimately going to lead to war. And you have two border states that begin giving Bismarck the opportunity to start war with Denmark. And in 1864, he forms a alliance with Austria against Denmark. This will matter later on. They both believe that Schleswig and Holstein should be controlled by the German Confederation and that those areas shouldn't have a say-so. There's a quick fight, and Denmark gives the territory to Austria and Prussia. So Prussia takes Schleswig, Austria takes Holstein, and then now Austria holds a small bit of territory within inside Prussia. That's not going to work. And so he realizes that, Bismarck realizes that can't last, and at some point he's going to have to get rid of the Austria with inside. All right. Bismarck could not increase Prussia's power as long as Austria was in the way. But with two short wars, Bismarck moved Austria out of the way and established a unified German empire. And we're going to stop here. So this Edpuzzle will end tonight. This is the only one that you need to watch tonight. And we will pick up the second one tomorrow. So we're a little bit behind, but I think